I want to go to the educational issue here because in Cook County, city of Chicago in particular, it's an important one. Most people don't know that the Chicago public school system has an annual budget of $6 billion a year to educate 450,000 children. That on top of that, it has another $4.5 billion construction or capital project budget on an annual basis. If you combine the operating with the capital budget for Chicago public school system, which has roughly about 50,000 employees working there, educating these 450,000 kids. Educating is a loosely used term here. We're talking about almost $20,000 or more than $20,000 per pupil. Right. The operating budget alone is about $11,000 plus per pupil, and half of the children drop out before graduating 12th grade, and the ones that don't can't read at the 4th grade level.
And let me just, I'm going to step back. I want to say, whether it's healthcare or energy or education, we are trying the same thing that has been done in earlier administrations, or as John was saying, in European administrations, or sometimes in Asia, and we're expecting a different result.
Isn't this all about placating unions?
It is. It's all for the wrong reasons. I'm going to say it's for the placating of the unions. It's for insider benefit. It's not for the kids. Okay, and the healthcare situation is not for the poor who need healthcare, and the energy situation is not for the poor people who need to get out of their poverty. We have got an economy that has been through the worst economic recession in 40 years, and as we are trying to get out of that trough in the economy, the Obama administration is proposing millstone number 1 in education, millstone number 2 in energy, and millstone number 3 in healthcare, and saying, good luck economy, try and come back. And that is when we need a growing economy the most to pay off all of the borrowing that we're doing for these profligate spending programs that they passed in the first 90 days of the Obama administration.
Mm-hmm. Let me give you one ray of sunshine and hope, actually. I think there's...
Please, I need one.
We all need one. There's this myth that kids in Chicago, the west side, the south side, the kids that are in these terrible neighborhoods and these terrible public schools cannot perform on par with kids from the suburbs, with the slightly more well-funded, but not much more well-funded suburban schools. And it's an absolute myth. My colleague Colin Hitt, who's our Director of Education Policy, we've just released a study that demonstrates that in charter schools, which are public schools operating independent of the collective bargaining agreement with the Chicago Teachers Union, those kids throughout the entire charter school system within Chicago are graduating 75% of the time. The overall average in the Chicago public school system is 51%. To put that in some perspective, the statewide average is 77%. Some of the charter schools are graduating kids in the 80 percentile range, which puts them in the elite range of suburban schools. And these are kids from the same neighborhoods where their colleagues who are not lucky enough to get into a charter school are graduating 51% of the time. The social cost, as well as the financial cost of not having a high school diploma is extraordinary. It's about $221,000 a year per dropout. So the good news is that in Springfield, the cap was just lifted. So there was a limit on the number of charter schools in the city of Chicago. That has now been raised from 30 to 75, which means the 13,000 kids on a waiting list now, hoping for that chance at a lifeline, will now be able to get it in the coming years.
What we are talking about in terms of getting out of this mess is a overall critique of all of these structures. The Chicago public schools are dysfunctional. Mm-hmm. They have been dysfunctional. Mayor Daley said 20 years ago he wanted to be the education mayor. He hasn't been the education mayor, and he's had every opportunity to be the education mayor.
Completely failed on that score.
Of 100 kids who start in the Chicago public schools, only 6 get a college degree. Okay? 100 kids start, 6 get a college degree. The result for the families in Illinois is that we're older, we're poorer, we're less well educated, and we're less able to compete. And the result is jobs are leaving Illinois, opportunity is leaving Illinois, and the ability to move up in Illinois is being pushed down by the insiders who are benefiting at the Chicago public schools or in any of these failed structures.
There was an interesting study done recently, which I want to bring to your attention, which was it was deconstructing the myth that certain ethnic or racial groups perform better or worse in a scholastic environment. And they looked at 3 groups that this was particularly true about: Jewish Americans, Asian Islanders, and the looking at Haitian African American families in particular, and they looked at, of course, Asian, the Chinese Asian families, and what they found that all of those children, whether they were Asian, African American, or white, Jewish in this subset, performed equally well if they had a family structure that supported them, a family that valued education and pursued them to get a master's degree or a PhD degree or some other professional degree, and that really the level of performance on standardized tests for those who came from a steady, stable family environment, and where you had particularly the role of a father in that family, not only as a provider but as a mentor, a guide for the children, these children performed equally across the ethnic groups, and there wasn't really any difference in their performance and success in life later on.
People want desperately to succeed, and government in the United States has always had a responsibility related to education. But what we've seen in the 20th century is, especially in the latter half of the 20th century, as collective bargaining has taken over the provision of education, you've seen a stagnation at best for the vast majority of kids. And it's really got to end.
The performance lines are tied directly to, and it started in Michigan when unionization of teachers began, tenure began, performance started to flatline in the mid-'60s. But I think what is interesting to me is, Tony, what do you do with those kids who don't have that family environment? Should our loyalty be to the educational system and all that entails, from the unions to the bureaucracy to the government-run education system, or should the loyalty be to the children? And what we find time and time and time again is that the loyalty is to the system. And the loyalty, our societal responsibility to education, I think, is true. But how do we do that? And the way you do that is by freeing parents, whether they're a single parent or a two-parent household or a grandmother or an aunt, whoever it is that has custodial responsibility for that child, working with that child, free them to make the best choice for them. Charter schools, independent schools, or the best public school available. They should be making the choice, not the accident of birth by geography or in your family situation.
And that's an issue that you covered well in your 2010 budget solutions, balancing the state budget without tax hikes, talking about the charter schools. And our goal should be that every child in the United States should have the same opportunity that President Obama and Michelle Obama's children have, to go to the best schools, to have school vouchers where you can take that money that's available and take it to any school, not to a failing school because you're part of the school district, but to any school that you choose to take your children to. Don't you think?
I totally agree with that. And think about it for President Obama. School choice has worked very well for him himself, having gone primarily to private schools throughout his whole life.
It's a liberty issue. Go ahead.
Liberty issue. It's about choice.
It really
is.
See
it. And
it really
individual
is.
choice
and
it's about in your own life and your children's lives.
That's right. Charting your family's destiny.
I want to talk to both of you about the influence of unions, particularly here in the Rust Belt states.
Yes.
And Illinois is one of those Rust Belt states. And particularly, again, here in the county of Cook, city of Chicago, where the unions have such a lock on all government jobs, including educating children in the Chicago public school system, the Chicago colleges, the elementary school systems, high schools. I mean, not to mention the city, county, water reclamation, CTA, and all the other sister agencies. And your report, again, 2010 Budget Solutions, talks about the relative disparity between the private sector earnings versus the government earnings in terms of not only salary but the entire package, salary, pension, benefits. And there is a great disparity to the effect that the government employees make something like 15 or 20% more than the similarly situated persons in the private sector. Isn't that true?
That's exactly right. It's 12%. So just in rough terms, an average private sector employee would make somewhere around $48,000. A public sector employee would make roughly $53,000 to $54,000. But here's what's really interesting about the public sector employees in particular and the working class people of the state. There's a massive wealth transfer going on right now. And that wealth transfer is going from the working class guy living on the bungalow belt in the northwest side, people living on the south side, the west side, throughout the county. The working class neighborhoods of this county are transferring their personal wealth, paycheck by paycheck, into the pockets of public employees and turning them into millionaires. The kind of benefits they get and the pensions that they are receiving are extraordinarily amazing, and if you amortize it back into a net present value, they're millionaires. We're turning public employees into millionaires on the backs of the poor and working class. It's an outrage.